Okay, so today we're going to learn something a little bit different. There's only one exercise today, or one data set, and what we're going to do is try to make it more readable in our script. So we're going to be working with objects. So here we've got a data table. It's much bigger than what we've used before, and you can see it's got multiple rows, multiple columns. So it's an interesting challenge. So the first thing we're going to try to work out is who the top salesperson is given this data set. So we're going to use GoogleAppScipt, and as per usual, we'll go to Tools, Script Editor. We're going to make it half screen. Actually, I'm going to swap sides this time, just so my video doesn't cover over any of the details. And then what we're going to do here is call a function. So a function should get the top salesperson. So we'll call it that, get top salesperson. The data that it's going to give is all of this data, including the headlines. I mean the column titles. And it should give back who the top salesperson is. Obviously that function doesn't exist yet because we're going to write it. So function, need to spell it right. We called it get top salesperson. And it takes sales data. And what it should return is the top sales person. Okay, and we're going to initialize this variable at the top of our function. You can do it anywhere as long as you have to initialize it before you access it. So we're going to do it at the top, and we know it's going to be a string, which a string is just a set of characters. Can be single quotation mark, can be double, can be backticks, doesn't matter. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is have a look at our data, because we've got a lot of data coming in and it's going to be a confusing layout. So first thing we want to do is have a look at it. So we can do logger.log sales data. We'll save it. We'll run this function. Oh. It should be equals and then a function name. No space before the equals. Great, we've got blank because it's returning this blank empty string. But the important thing here is we can look at our executions. So we go view executions. And instead of that screen, we're just going to look on here. So here we've got a very large array. So the first thing in our array, I'll just make this a bit, okay, that's better. So the first item in the array is an array, and this array has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 values, and each of these values is the heading of the column. So if we can compare it to the exercise, we've got these headings. That's what we're getting as our first array. Okay, second array is the first row of actual data. So here is the date, the salesperson, whether it's a new customer or not, the location, the client name, and the value. Okay, and then the second item in the array is another array with this information. And this is very difficult to work with because we have to remember which array number is which information. So what I'm going to do first is rearrange this into a more usable format because these arrays are not doing it for us. So what does that look like? It looks like an object. So an object can be defined like this. So let data row equal, and then we use our curly brackets for an object. So we use curly brackets to say we're going to run this code. We also use curly brackets for an object. And then within an object, we can create, so an object is like an array, except if each item in the array had a label or a key. So in this data row, we might have date, and then semicolon, colon, and then the date will be, in this case, we're getting back a string like this. So we can use a string, comma separated, and then another one. So sales rep name is equal to another string, James. Okay, and then we can save it, and we have an object called data row. So an object is a collection of labeled variables. So we can access them by saying data row dot date, and that's how we get to this. So if we say data row dot date, it is here, and we can demonstrate by saying logger dot log. Oops, that shortcut doesn't work in Google Sheets. Logger.log data row dot date. So if we run this function, we'll be able to see the date value of this object. So if we save it, we run this again, we should get another, not yet. Sometimes you got to remove it completely and place it again to rerun it and trigger an execution. No data yet. Okay, we can see it just behind my face. So the first thing we have is the data that we sent. That's the same, and then this date. So what we're getting here is this object data.row, data row dot date. If we said data row dot sales rep name, we get James instead of this date. Okay, so what I want to do is put all of this data into useful object data. The reason for that is because I want to get it so that everything has a label. All of the variables have labels. So the first thing we're going to do, I just noticed there's a typo here, and it's probably in every single one of my lessons. How embarrassing. So what I'm going to do is write a new function that we're going to use as a utility to turn an array into an object. So what this function should do is take any array that has the first item in the array is the labels of, like in this case, the column headings, and then the other items in the array should be the data. So we're going to call it, we'll call it range to object, because in Google Sheets we'd call this a range. So we're going to run a new function range to object. Okay, so this takes an array which we're going to call range, and then what it will do is return the same range but in an object. So we might call it range object. Why not? And we can say let range object equal, now I was going to call it an object, but actually we want this to be an array still, but each item in the array should have labeled values. So for example, we should see this same data here, but instead of seeing just the date, we'll have date is this date. So it's actually going to be a range. Sorry, it's going to be an array. So maybe we'll call it range with labels, because that's essentially all we're doing. That's what we're going to return from this function. So when we run this function, it's going to be the same data. It's going to take the same sort of data. So what we want to do is a for loop, so we can loop through all of this data. So for let I equal 0, semicolon. How many times do we want to run this for? As long as range is long. Right? So range dot length. So we want to run this loop as many times as there are items in this array, which in this case 1, 2, each row. We want to run this code for each row. And at the end of it, what we want to do is add 1 to I. Okay, so each time we run this loop, what we want to do is label what these are. So if we have so what we could do is we can say, there's a few ways we can do this. Let row object, call it row object equal an empty object, but actually we're going to give it some labels now that we'll have, and then we'll add in the values later. So we're going to say row object. What we want to do is take the first item in the array and make it the date. So date is equal to, in an object we use a colon. So date is equal to still range I, and then the first item in the range. Now there's a difficult thing here because, it's not difficult, but it's what it is. So range I0 sales date is is what we're accessing here. It's not what we want to access. We want to skip over these labels. Now, if we're a little bit more learning a bit more advanced things, we could take these labels directly and use them as our labels in the object. But for now, we're going to keep it simple, and we're going to do this naming manually. But we want to start at row 2, so that's index 1 instead of 2. So initially we want it to start at 1. So now range 1, 0 is Sunday, 10th of May. Okay, so the next thing we want is sales rep, and we want that to equal range 01. That is this row, the second item, so comma, this is our second item, James, sales rep is James. So the next item is renewal. Is this a renewal or not? So this is a little bit different. So this is a true or a false. It's also called a boolean. So if we look in here, we have a checkbox. So if you read the contents of it, you'll see it's actually true or false, and it changes depending on if it's ticked. So in JavaScript and GoogleAppScipt, this is called a boolean. So what we call a boolean, so the same way we have a variable, we call it name, or if it's an array, we call it names. In the case of a boolean, we say is this. So in this case, we'll say is renewal, and then we'll get true or false, and then everybody knows is going to be true or false, or boolean. Is renewal, and we're going to access item 3 in the range. Okay, a few more to go. Region, straightforward, it's a string. Just paste a few of these. Client name, we're going to camel case it because it's easier to read and we need it to be one word in JavaScript. We can't have a space in the key. You can, but it's very difficult. We're not going to do it. So the next one, value of sale. So camel case there is we capitalize the first letter of each word, like a camel humps. I don't know. Oh, that's everything. Value of sale. So we've got all of them. So now what we do is each time we run this loop, we say let a row object exist, and this row object has the keys and value sets of date, sales rep, is renewal, client name, value of sale, and each accesses a different range. And then what we want to do is add this row object to range with labels. So range with labels.push this row object. So now what we do is this code runs the first time. It says I is equal to 1. Let the row object equal date is range 1 0. Sales rep is range 1 1, and so on. And then we push that onto this array here. Then we start again, and JavaScript completely forgets that this exists because it's in a code block. This is our code block here. We'll just fix this indenting so we can see, for this reason, so we can see where does our for loop end. We can see very clearly now, this is where it ends. So the second time it runs, it completely forgets about row object, and it says let row object exist. Okay, brand new thing, didn't know about it before. And this time it's going to say range 2 0, 2 1, 2 2, 2 3, 2 4. And then it's going to push this object, just this brand new object the loop has just created, onto here. So then we're going to have 2 objects here, and it's going to do this for every time, for the length of this range. Now, one more thing is we told this loop to run for the length of the range, which includes this. So it's going to run at a time for this, which we do not want because it's going to be after that. There's no data there, it's going to break. So we can actually just say -1. Run this the length of the range less 1. Okay, so this should work. So now we're going to test it by saying we're going to run this object. So we're going to run this function. So we'll get rid of this. We don't need this anymore. We don't need this anymore. Range to object. We're going to give it the range of sales data and the return value. So this will be replaced by this range with labels. So now if we say range, I don't want to call it the same thing because it's not. So let formatted data equal range to object, giving it sales data. And then we can logger.log the formatted data, fix our indenting. So now if we save this, okay, we've got an error. Line 17, we have an unknown token of colon. So you can see line 17, I've put a comma before the colon. Okay, should work, no issues. Let's remove this, put it there again, causing an execution to run. Status unknown, never seen that. Let's just refresh. Okay, status unknown, that's fine. So this is our old data, so that's not what we want. Oh, this is our newest run. Okay, we have our execution that is running. It's not finished running yet. Okay, so here is our initial data. Let's make this full screen. So we have our initial data here in an array of arrays. And here is our new formatted data. So now we have each item in this array is an object, and this object has helpful labels. Is renewal true? Client name DE, value of sales simple assurance. I think we've got an issue. Okay, so date is correct, sales rep is correct, everything else is wrong. Let's fix that quickly, shouldn't be an issue. So we said sales date, so renewal is an issue. Is renewal is I.2. Okay, oh, we forgot region. That's what happened. It's a copy paste error. So region should be 3, client name should be 4, and value of sale should be 5. Okay, let's re-trigger this. You can also trigger it by just changing the input data. It is clever enough to work that out. So it's running, so we don't have our logs yet because it's still running. Okay, is renewal true? Client name, still wrong. Still wrong. Ah, because it's the previous one. Okay. Yep, still wrong. So client name should be region. So if you see this is 526, it's actually 529, so it's probably an old execution of this. We're just going to save it. We'll remove it. Run it again. Now we're going to fix the formatting because I copy pasted it wrong. Okay, it's run just now. Let's have a look. So we have our initial data, and then our correct data. Value of sales 60, region DE, sales rep James, date is correct, is renewal true, client name simple assurance. Great, that is exactly what we wanted to see. So now when we say get the top salesperson, so I'm going to remove the loggers. So now it's much easier to work out who the top salesperson is. What we want to do is a for loop. So let I equal 0, because we're going to run this as many times as we have formatted data. So because our formatted data is still an array, it's just each item in the array is an object, this still works. So I should be less than formatted data dot length. Each time we run it, we want to increase I by 1. And what we want to do is add up these totals. So let's initialize the totals. So again, we're going to do this manually, but it's more simple and it works fine. So James total equals 0. Let Daniel total equals 0. Let Kathy total equal 0. And what we want to do here is we want to say if formatted data I, so this is the I value in the array, so first, second, third, and so on, dot, because now it's an object, so we can say dot sales rep is equal to James. This is a capital, cool. If that's the case, what we want to do is add this sale to James's total. So we want to say formatted data I dot value of sale. So we want to add this to James's total. So actually say James's total equals James's total plus formatted data, or make it a bit easier to read, plus equals, same thing. So we're going to run this 3 times. Again, we can do this in a cleverer way later, but for the moment, because the purpose of this lesson is to learn what is a object, we're going to do this manually. Kathy total and Daniel total. Okay, so now we've run this loop, we have our totals for each sales rep. So now what we want to do, we want to say if James total space and in parentheses James total is bigger than Daniel's total, and this might be a new thing, and it's the same as the AND function in Google Sheets, but it means these both need to be true. So and James total is bigger than Kathy's total. We actually want to return James. So we're not actually going to use this. Oh, we can return it directly, or we can say let top salesperson equal James. Doesn't matter. So we're going to do this for each salesperson. Actually, we're going to do this a little bit differently. Else. So we can do else if, which means if this is true, do this. Else, if this is true, do this. And then we can do another else. If, and then we're going to do some copy pasting. So this time we want is Daniel total bigger than James's total and Kathy's total. So if Daniel's total is bigger than James's total and Daniel's total is bigger than Kathy's total, top salesperson equals Daniel. And same for here. If Kathy's total is bigger than Daniel's total and Kathy's total is bigger than James' total, top salesperson is Kathy. Return to top salesperson. Okay, let's see if that worked. James. I don't think so. I don't think James is the correct answer. Because when I did it previously, it was not. Because Kathy has this €200 sale here. So we've got an issue. That's fine. We're going to look at the logs. James total. So what we're doing here is we're going to log these totals, and we're going to see if our totals are correct. So maybe our problem is in these totals, maybe our problem is in the if statement. I'm not sure. We can read through and try to work it out, or we can just run the function again and have a look at what answer we get. So running the function, function's completed. Let's look at our executions. Okay, so we've got 293 for James, 178 for Daniel, and 127 for Kathy. So I know this is wrong because we already established Kathy has this 200 euro sale. So let's break down where we might have gone wrong. Okay, so we're running this. I think we're running this the right amount of times because it's roughly the right value. If the sales rep equals James, add to James's total. If the sales rep equals Daniel, add to Daniel's total. If the sales rep is Kathy, add to Kathy's total. Okay, we can check our, this seems to be right, so we can check our formatted data. Maybe we've made a mistake in here. Logger.log formatted data. Sometimes when you have a bug like this, it just helps to go through it all one by one. I don't think we'll get time to work out the rest of these, but we'll just do this one top salesperson. Oh, I've deleted the function name. Okay, equals function name and the range. Loading James. Okay, so let's look at the data we've got. Refresh. All right. The one I want to look at is this last one because I know that it's 200 euros, and it's the problem why we're not seeing it. So you can see the value of sale is 14. Client name is Birkenegg. Is this correct or not? It's not. We're running this one and then we're stopping. Okay, it's interesting. Why are we doing that? So our problem is in this function here. So, okay, so our issue is we're saying I is equal to 1. And we should stop running this loop when I is, we should only run this loop so long as I is less than the range.length. So the issue we have is, I said the range.length minus 1. But this counts, so so it starts at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it stops at the range length. Now the range length includes the headline. So if we're running, for example, you can see the count. Move this here so you can see the count. 13. We're saying start here and stop when you get to 12, but we're starting at 1. So we'll say so we start at 1, but in an array we start at 0, so we're essentially starting at 2. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then by the time we get here we're at 14. So there is our bug. I made a mistake here. You don't need to reduce it because we're already skipping the first one. So now if we save it, if we run this again, we've got Kathy as the correct top salesperson. Great. Okay, cool. So that works. So it took a little bit longer than expected, but I think that debugging is really useful to know. And the main thing I wanted you to know here is what is an object? This is an object. How do you use it? Use it like this. That's the main thing I wanted to get out of today, so we've done that. Feel free in the exercises to do these other questions. Pretty straightforward. I'm going to answer them the same way, but you know, in this case we're going to get the country with the highest revenue, biggest client, and the average number of sales per month. So they're just little activities to try to help you to play with loops, if statements, functions, and now objects. Great, thanks a lot. The link to the exercises is in the description. You find it there, and as always, ask me any questions on here. Great.